Hey there, night owls. Welcome to the Voice of Darkness. I'm thrilled you've joined me on this journey into the unknown. Before we dive in, let me know, where in the world are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see just how far our darkness reaches. Chapter 1: The Bargain Purchase. Your friend's father had been on the hunt for a true bargain when he chanced upon the old Victorian house at the far end of Elmbridge Road. Nestled between crumbling gravestones and ivy-clad walls of the adjoining cemetery, the property's facade was draped in moss and shadow. Yet, despite its eerie location and peeling paintwork, the price was too good to resist, a fraction of what any similar home might fetch. You arrived on a crisp autumn afternoon, the air thick with the tang of damp earth and fallen leaves. The wrought-iron gate creaked as you pushed it open, revealing a narrow path that led to a sagging porch. The previous owner, Mr. Abernathy, greeted you at the door. He was a gaunt, silver-haired gentleman whose hollow eyes seemed to carry the weight of long-held secrets. With a trembling hand, he placed a heavy bunch of keys into your friend's father's palm. "Mind one thing," he rasped, his voice scarcely above a whisper. "That basement door must remain sealed, always. It hasn't been opened in decades." You exchanged a glance with your friend's father and smiled politely. "Of course," you said, though inside you felt a flicker of unease. The notion seemed nothing more than an odd superstition. Perhaps Mr. Abernathy simply wished to deter meddlesome intruders. As the sun dipped low, you helped unload the removal van, carrying crates of kitchenware, lamps, and boxes of books into the grand but faded drawing room. The high ceilings and ornate cornices spoke of a bygone era, yet cobwebs draped the corners like silent watchers. All around, the gravestones stood sentinel, their inscriptions worn by time. You made a mental note to close the heavy curtains before night fell. Before you departed, Mr. Abernathy lingered by the basement hatch. His bony finger hovered above the latch. "Remember," he warned again, "never ever open it." You nodded, though your mind was already racing with thoughts of exploring every corner of this bargain find. After all, what was a closed door but an invitation to satisfy one's curiosity? That night, as the house settled into an uneasy quiet, you wondered how badly you might regret ignoring Mr. Abernathy's warning. Chapter 2: First Night Unease. By the time dusk folded its inky cloak over Elmbridge Road, an unsettling hush had settled around the house. The gravestones of the adjacent cemetery seemed to lean in closer, as though eavesdropping on every rustle of the wind. You and your friend's father had finished unpacking the bulk of the boxes, leaving only a few scattered remnants in the drawing room. The heavy curtains were drawn against the gathering gloom, but shadows still danced at the edges of the room, shifting with the final rays of the sun. As you climbed the narrow staircase to inspect the upper rooms, the old floorboards creaked mournfully underfoot. Each groan sounded magnified in the hollow silence, making you pause halfway up to listen. For a moment, you thought you heard a soft sigh, as if the house itself exhaled. You shook your head, dismissing it as the settling of timbers. Old houses had quirks, after all. That night, sleep was reluctant to take you. Every time you began to drift, a distant thump echoed from somewhere below, a muted, uncertain sound that could have been the settling of furniture, or something less innocuous. You lay rigid in bed, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling beams, counting each heartbeat as though it were a warning. At precisely 1:17 a.m., a sudden chill swept through the room. The old sash window rattled gently, though the glass panes were firmly closed. A faint draft brushed your neck, causing gooseflesh to rise across your arms. You drew the sheet closer and listened. Somewhere deep within the house, a door clicked shut. It was the kind of quiet click that sounded absurdly loud in the stillness, like someone turning a key in an invisible lock. Your heart thudded so loudly you feared it might echo down the corridors. You forced yourself to sit up, gaze flitting nervously between the dark corners of the room and the sealed basement door at the far end of the landing. Summoning courage, you slipped from under the duvet and padded across the creaking floorboards. As your hand rested on the doorknob, the hairs at the nape of your neck prickled. The latch itself felt cool to the touch, as though it had been chilled by unseen fingers. You hesitated, recalling Mr. Abernathy's warning. Never, ever open it. Yet something deeper urged you to press on, even as an unshakable unease settled in your chest. After all, the night was still young, and this was only the beginning of the house's first, restless vigil. Chapter 3. Haunted Kitchen Lights. On the third night, the house seemed to conspire against your peace of mind. You'd resolved to stay in bed until dawn, but exhaustion had fled at the first hint of moonlight. The narrow hall outside your room lay bathed in a pale glow, and beyond it, the kitchen loomed like a stage set for some unseen performance. You told yourself that the lights were old and temperamental. Antique wiring in a century-old dwelling often needed coaxing, but as you reached the top of the stairs, exhaustion gave way to unease. Ever so faintly you heard it, the soft hum of electricity, suddenly cut by a click. You paused, breath fogging in the chill air. Then came another click, followed by a sharp burst of light. The kitchen chandelier blazed into life, casting long, sinister shadows over the worktops. As you watched, mesmerized, the glow winked out again without warning. Moments later, it flared back on, brighter still, as if to taunt you. You climbed down the stairs, each creak amplifying in the gloom. In the kitchen, the ceiling lamp pulsed on and off, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. You flicked the wall switch once, then twice, and the light obeyed, shutting off on command only to spring back into being mere seconds later. Your finger trembled on the switch plate, and you felt the walls closing in, as though the house itself were breathing around you. As you stood there, rooted to the spot, the thought struck you that this was no mere electrical fault. A colder draft swept over your shoulders, though all the windows were firmly shut. The lamp's glass shade vibrated, producing a high-pitched tinkle that reverberated through the silent rooms beyond. You reached out to touch the shade, half expecting to feel a hand of ice upon it, but found only dusty glass. Backing away, you realized that the light was following you. Wherever you moved, it blinked in synchrony, as though observing your every step. Your heart pounded as you considered retreating upstairs, but an inexplicable urge held you fast. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the light extinguished altogether, leaving you in utter darkness. You stood alone, caught between relief and terror, knowing that whatever force dwelled within the walls had made its presence unmistakably clear, and that this was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The Phantom Locksmith. That night sleep proved impossible. Each time you closed your eyes, the echo of a distant click jolted you awake. At first, you assumed it was the wind, but with each passing hour the sound grew unmistakably deliberate, an unseen hand turning a key in the front door lock. Summoning what courage remained, you crept from your room into the corridor. The landing was bathed in a sickly pale light from the street lamp beyond the curtained window. Your heart pounded with each step as you made your way downstairs. In the drawing room, the heavy oak door stood firm, its brass handle glinting ominously. Silence hung thick around you. Then, as if on cue, the click resounded again. You froze, breath caught in your throat, and stepped forward. The bolt shot home of its own accord, the deadlock sliding into place with a soft thunk. You reached out and jiggled the handle. It remained locked. Unease prickled up your spine. You tried the crawlspace latch beside the door, but that, too, had been secured. Whoever, or whatever, was locking the house did not wish you to leave. The thought sent a shiver through your blood. Compelled by a mixture of dread and determination, you ventured outside under the porch. The iron gate at the front of the property stood ajar, its rusty hinges slack. You staggered out into the chill night air and glanced up the road, empty. No sign of a figure, no light in any window. Only the silent headstones of the cemetery, their outlines ghostly in the lamplight. As you returned to the threshold, the door clicked open behind you. You spun around to see it standing unlocked, swaying slightly on its hinges. Gathering your nerve, you stepped inside and locked it yourself, turning the key twice. The sound of the bolt dropping into place felt like a small victory. Yet as you ascended the stairs back to your room, you couldn't shake the sensation of being followed, watched. Somewhere in the house, a lock had been manipulated, and you were certain it wasn't the work of human hands. The insistent thrum of your heartbeat was the only reassurance you had that you were still alive, and painfully alone in a home that was slowly revealing its true masters. Chapter 5: Blood Without Wound. At first light, you awoke to an unremarkable calm. The sky beyond the drawn curtains was a dreary slate gray, and the muffled croak of distant crows drifted through the slight crack in the sash window. You stretched, blinking away the remnants of a troubled dream, then swung your legs over the side of the bed, only to freeze. Your pajama trousers were splashed with dark red stains. They looked unmistakably like blood, yet when you ran your fingers across the spots, there was no stickiness, no warmth that might betray fresh injury. Panic prickled along your skin as you examined your arms, your torso, even the backs of your knees. Not a mark marred them. Nothing that could have bled. You stumbled from the bed and flicked on the bedside lamp. Its weak glow revealed more stains than you had noticed at first. A smear on the sleeve of your t-shirt, a tiny rivulet near the hem of your top. Each stain was perfectly formed, as though some invisible hand had tipped a dripping vessel across your clothes. You stood motionless, heart racing. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, you rose to full height and strode to the wardrobe mirror. Squinting at your reflection, you turned this way and that, searching for hidden wounds. You inspected every inch of skin under the harsh lamplight, your back, your shoulders, the nape of your neck, but found nothing. You were unscathed. In the bathroom, you filled the basin with cold water and dunked the stained fabric. The liquid ran red for a moment before fading to clear, yet the stains remained on the cloth. You rinsed and splashed water over your own limbs, but your skin remained immaculate. How could the blood have transferred without a source? As the day wore on, you attempted to distract yourself with routine tasks, making tea, stacking plates, unpacking boxes. Yet every time you glanced down at your sleeve, your stomach twisted anew. The house seemed to loom closer, its silence oppressively watchful. Even the old grandfather clock ticked with a heavier, more deliberate rhythm. By afternoon you realized the stains had begun to dry, cementing their presence on the fabric. In a swell of dread, you remembered the basement door, still sealed tight below. You dared not revisit it, yet the stains whispered of something that ghastly realm. The house had made its claim on you, and you felt certain this blood was only the first proof. Chapter 6: Unearthly Noises. That night you resolved to ignore the basement door entirely. Yet as the grandfather clock struck midnight, a low, metallic scraping drifted up through the floorboards. It was faint at first, like a nail being dragged across a blackboard, but quickly grew louder and more insistent. You lay rigid in bed, hard hammering, as the sound traveled in imperfect rhythms, pause, scrape, as though something were clawing its way free from beneath the earth. Compelled by a mixture of dread and fascination, you swung your legs over the edge of the bed. Every step towards the staircase felt heavy, as if invisible weights clung to your ankles. The corridor was illuminated only by the moonlight slanting through the curtains, casting long, wavering shadows. With each careful footfall, the noise became clearer, a hollow, rasping wail, punctuated by soft thuds, like footsteps in water. At the foot of the stairs you paused. The basement door lay ahead, its mahogany surface mottled with age. You could picture the rusty latch that Mr. Abernathy had so fervently insisted remain untouched. Summoning what little courage you had, you reached out and turned the cold handle. It gave way with a groan of protest, revealing a pitch-black void beyond. A choking wave of damp air washed over you, carrying the scent of earth and decay. You pressed your palm against the doorframe and stepped inside, the scraping immediately intensifying. Beneath your feet, the flagstones felt uneven, as though something moved just out of sight. You lit a torch, its beam trembling, and swept it across the room. The light fell upon empty crates and cobweb-draped shelves, but no living thing. Then, at the far corner, you saw it, a triangular metal grate set into the floor, its bars slick with moisture. From beneath it came a low moan, like a chorus of distant voices trapped underground. One by one, the bars shifted, as though something pressed against them from below. You stumbled back, torch clattering to the ground. Your breath came in ragged gasps as the grate began to rattle violently. A final, bone-chilling shriek echoed up through its bars, an urgent, pained cry that seemed to tear at the very walls. Then, as abruptly as it began, all was silent once more. Shaking, you fled upstairs and slammed the door, bolting it with trembling hands. In your chest, your heart pounded like a drum. Whatever lurked beneath that grate had just reminded you of its presence, and you knew, with cold certainty, that it would not remain contained for long. Chapter 7: The Forbidden Certificate. Dawn's pale light filtered through the dirty sash window, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. After the night's terror, you resolved to confront whatever lay beneath the floorboards. Armed with nothing more than a torch and a trembling resolve, you crept back down the narrow staircase to the basement. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the house itself were resisting your advance. The basement door creaked open, revealing the dank chamber beyond. The metallic grate in the center of the floor was still, no longer rattling with frantic protest, but its presence felt ominously permanent. You swept the torch's beam around the room, empty crates, a rusted spade leaning against the far wall, and thick cobwebs clinging to low rafters. Then your light settled on a small table tucked into a shadowed alcove. Approaching, you saw that the table was old and scarred, its surface pitted with age. On it lay a single document, framed by yellowed edges and dusted with fine grit. Kneeling, you picked up the paper with gloved fingers. It was a death certificate, printed on brittle parchment, the ink faded but still legible. Your breath caught as you read the name at the top, the very man who had sold you the house. Below, the registration recorded a cause of death and a date, 10 years in the past. You stared at the entry over and over, disbelieving. The signature of the registrar, the official seal pressed into the corner, and the date stamped clearly as July 6, 2015. A sudden draft stirred the edges of the document, and you pressed it flat against the table, tracing the embossed stamp with a fingertip. How could this be? The man had been alive just days ago to hand over the keys. Yet here was incontrovertible proof that he had perished a decade earlier. Your heart pounded as the realization settled in. You had taken your home from a dead man. The basement, sealed for decades, must have been his refuge, or perhaps his prison. The certificate lay there as a silent accusation, a record of a life concluded long before you even grasped the latch. You rose unsteadily, death certificate in hand, and backed toward the stairs. With each step upward, the weight of the paper pressed against your chest like a warning. This was no ordinary house. It was a mausoleum, its secrets buried until now. And buried men had no intention of staying dead. Chapter 8: Confronting the Truth. You stood at the top of the basement steps, the brittle death certificate trembling in your hand. The air in the hall felt stifling, as though the house itself held its breath. Every instinct urged you to flee, leave the keys on the hall table and never look back. But a deeper curiosity anchored your feet. You had awakened something in these walls, and now you had to decide, investigate further, or risk becoming another name on that long-forgotten register. Summoning courage, you slipped the certificate into your pocket and crept back down. The narrow stairwell seemed darker than before, as if shadows pressed in from every corner. At the foot of the stairs, you re-examined the metal grate. It sat flush with the stone floor, the bars cold and unyielding. Yet beneath it, you were certain you heard a faint, rasping breath, like someone exhaling through a cracked skull. You searched the basement for any tool to prise it open, finding only an old spade with a rotted handle. With trembling resolve, You wedged the blade between two bars and forced it downward. The iron groaned in protest but shifted an inch, then another, until you could lift the grate. A rush of fetid air greeted you, carrying the sour tang of earth and something far fouler. Peering into the darkness, you made out outlines, mounds of disturbed soil, brittle bones half exposed, and what looked like a tattered shroud stained with age. The torchlight caught a pair of hollow sockets in a skull, which seemed to regard you with accusatory emptiness. You swallowed hard, fighting the bile rising in your throat. As you leaned closer, the unmistakable sound of dragging came from behind. You spun around, torch sweeping the room, but found nothing. When you looked back down, the grate had slid partially closed, as though guided by unseen hands. Panic flared in your chest. Clutching the death certificate, you scrambled upstairs 2 steps at a time, slamming the basement door behind you. Your back pressed against the wood, you slid to the floor and pressed your ear to the panel. The rasping breath came again, followed by a soft, deliberate knock once, twice, on the other side. In that moment you understood, the house was neither empty nor benign. It was alive with the restless dead, and you had dared to disturb their rest. With dawn still hours away, you resolved to stay, and to uncover every secret this mausoleum of a home concealed, even if it meant confronting the man whose death you had unearthed.